How's it going today, guys? In today's episode, I'm going to continue talking about my second trip to Puerto Rico. And I'm going to continue where I left off in part two, where I was in Ponce. My final night sleeping in my Airbnb when I was in Ponce, I was doing some deep research on what the weather was going to be like the next couple of days because, like I've talked about before, when you're in Puerto Rico, anything can happen and your plans can change like that. So my original plan was to continue walking from Ponce all the way to Ceiba and get on the boat to go to Vaquez. And that didn't work out because that final morning a huge rainstorm came into Ponce and the towns that were next to it, like Salinas and so on and so forth. It was going to be raining for the next 4 or 5 days, and not just a little bit of rain, like we're talking pouring rain. And I didn't want to be stuck in Ponce for those 4 or 5 days because I had a very limited budget to do everything that I needed to do, and I knew staying in Ponce any longer would throw that budget off. So again, it was one of those things that I had to do where I had to make a quick decision. And I realized that up in San Juan, it was raining, but not raining nearly as hard as it was down south in Ponce. So I called a cab and I got a ride to San Juan, and I got dropped off, and I got an Airbnb in Santurce and decided to spend a couple days in San Juan and get ready to just walk the northeast coast and go that way to Ceiba instead. So I made it to my Airbnb and I went and took photographs again of one of my favorite cemeteries of all time there in Santurce, the Villa Palmeras Cemetery. So I got to spend a couple hours there in the rain. I had my poncho on, and what I would do is I'd go take some videos and photos, and then when the rain got too hard, I'd just go hide under a tree. And after a while, I ended up getting a lot of stuff done. And it was kind of a funny story at the Airbnb that I was at in Santurce. The lady didn't know how to speak English and I didn't know how to speak Spanish, so we ran into each other in this balcony up on the second story of her house, and we were kind of talking to each other but both laughing because we didn't know what we were saying. She was saying something to me in Spanish and I was just laughing, and I was like, yeah, I have no idea what you're saying. I don't know Spanish. And I just kept laughing, and then she kept laughing and speaking in Spanish, and she was probably saying the same thing to me. Yeah, I don't know what you're saying. And we had a good laugh. And Santurce is one of my favorite places in all of Puerto Rico. It's just so unique and different and so packed full of life and concrete and chickens and cats and really nice people. So I stayed pretty busy while I was in the San Juan area for a couple days. I went back to the Castle Cemetery and took some photographs and videos of that too, and I believe that's what you guys are looking at now as the background of this episode, is the Castle Cemetery there in San Juan. But then I went even deeper into the interior of the San Juan area, and I got to photograph the Villa Navarez cemetery, and that was also amazing. It was one of my main reasons for wanting to go back to San Juan, because I was really looking at that cemetery ever since my first trip to Puerto Rico, and I just never quite made it there. And my final night in Santurce, I started really planning out what was going to be my next walk, and I was going to walk to Ceiba from San Juan. So I got up really early in the morning, earlier than I wanted to, but I wanted a head start because I knew I had about a 7 or 8 hour walk ahead of me before I got to Loiza, Puerto Rico. And so I got up and said my goodbyes to San Truce and started my march. And it was a great walk to Loiza. There's lots of beautiful beaches on the coastline and all that, and lots of beautiful sights to see, palm trees, sand. I spent a couple hours of it just walking down the beach, and I just was in really high spirits at that point. And then I made it to Loiza finally about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's when things got a little weird. I was walking around the town of Loiza, and it just something just didn't quite feel right. It felt a little off with me. I was in the plaza, and I could just tell people were wondering what I was doing, and I just knew that, oh man, staying the night in this plaza just it's not gonna fly. And part of my rules for this new walk was I was just gonna get an Airbnb every other day. I was gonna stay outside one night and then get an Airbnb the next night, then stay outside one night and then get an Airbnb the next night. And that would make things a lot easier on me, because now I also decided that I needed to go to the mayor's office in every town and just try to get permission and do everything like that. And that also takes time. So getting an Airbnb every 2 days really made things a lot easier for me. I could keep clean better, keep all my stuff charged, and so on and so forth. So Loiza wasn't in my plans for getting an Airbnb. I was going to wait until the next day, so I decided just to stay outside, even though things just didn't feel right in the town. I'll never forget that night in Loiza, though, as it would turn out. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember going to this really cool little pizza place and getting a pizza for dinner, and charging my phone and my tablet and my battery in the establishment. And it was Super Bowl Sunday. I planned it out that way. I planned on walking to Loiza on Sunday specifically for a reason, because in Puerto Rico, the cemeteries, a lot of them are closed on the weekends, and I'm not really trying to hop too many fences and do stuff like that. I know I have in the past, but I really try to avoid that if all possible. So the weekends could also be kind of dead time where I have to find something else to occupy my time. And so Sunday was a good day for doing that big 7, 8, 9 hour walk to Loiza. And I knew I could talk to the municipal Monday morning and film and photograph the cemeteries there. And then I'd have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And by then, hopefully, I'd be in Ceiba. That was the goal. And so those were my plans. And that part of it I executed really well. So it was Super Bowl Sunday, the Chiefs versus the 49ers. And in Puerto Rico, you get everything like 3 hours later. So I remember watching the highlights at about midnight in Loiza, just after the game ended and the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. And I was laying on this bench outside of the hospital in Loiza, or the emergency room, something like that. And I just got done watching the Super Bowl highlights, and I noticed across the road there's 3 guys that are walking up towards me, and it automatically made me pretty uncomfortable. So I got up real quick and put my hat on and put everything in my bag and got my bag strapped around my back just in case something crazy was about to happen. And it did. They just stood over on the other side of the street from me and just started shooting their guns in the air. Bang, 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 bang. And I just could not believe what was happening. It was almost surreal. So I get up and I walk around the corner, and start heading towards the main town. And once I got around that corner real fast, I took off running. And I ended up hiding in the bushes next to this McDonald's or Burger King. I can never remember in my stories if I'm at a McDonald's or a Burger King, honestly. But this time I wasn't patronizing the establishment. I was hiding outside in the bushes in between these two buildings, and I just could not believe what just happened, but I was happy I got away. And so I'm laying there in between these two buildings, and I start feeling like ants or bugs or something crawling on me. So I had to get out of there. But I definitely didn't want to go back to that same area that I was at. So I headed north up closer to the ocean in Loiza, and I found a bench right by a main highway that was literally right next to one of the cemeteries there in town too. So I just laid on that bench all night with one eye open, just cautious of every noise that I was hearing after what I just experienced. But nothing happened, and I got up that next morning really early, and I noticed that cemetery that I was laying by, the gate wasn't locked and the gate was open and the sun was coming out. So I decided just to go film and photograph it before even talking to the municipality, because I knew their office wasn't going to be open for another couple hours. So I filmed and photographed the cemetery up there, the North Cemetery in Loiza. And then I went into the town, the main part of town, and talked to the municipal and got permission to photograph and film their old cemetery. And that was pretty cool. And I got all this done by 10:30 in the morning, and then I was out of there. I was like, okay, it's time for me to go and leave this town now. I'm not going to push my luck any further. I'm just grateful that I was able to capture the cemeteries there. So then from Loiza, I walked to Canovanas, and that was a really cool town. I ended up having a pretty good time there, and I got an Airbnb, and I got something to eat and got some supplies, and I went to one cemetery there, and again, there was no caretaker or anything for it, or I shouldn't say no caretaker, because it was pretty well maintained. It's just somebody wasn't there full time, and so there was no lock on the gate, and the gate was open. So I just walked in there and I filmed and photographed that cemetery, and then I went to the big cemetery that they have in the city. And it was kind of funny, the head caretaker, I kind of snuck up on him. I tend to do that. I'm a real quiet walker because I walk on my toes, and I went and tapped this guy on the shoulder while he was working on a grave, and he jumped around and had his fists up at me like he was ready to box, and I started laughing and kind of just backed up a little bit, and I was like, my bad. I asked him if I could film and photograph the cemetery there, and he's like, well, let me go get this form for you. So I walked across the cemetery with him and went into his office, and he told me that he was a veteran and he used to live in the United States for a while, but he was a Puerto Rican guy. And he gave me this form that I had to go take to the mayor's office and get filled out. So I was like, all right, even though it really set me back time-wise. And I was like, okay. And so I marched to the mayor's office and ended up getting that filled out, and I got permission, and I talked to a couple really cool homeless people that were hanging out there in the main part of the town, and even offered to take them out for coffee, but they had other things they had to do, which was fine with me because I had a lot of stuff I had to do as well. And so I marched back to that big cemetery and spent about 4.5 hours filming and photographing it. And then I knew I had a huge walk ahead of me because I had to march to Rio Grande after that. So I made it to Rio Grande at about 3:30 in the afternoon, maybe 4:30, sometime between 3:30 and 4:30 in the afternoon, and I made it to the municipal office before they closed, and I got permission to go film and photograph the cemetery. They said shut the gate behind you and you leave, and that was great. So I was able to go film the Rio Grande cemetery as the sun was coming down. And that was the only cemetery up until that point that I was able to film as the sun was going down like that. And I got it done that day, and I didn't think I was going to be able to get that far. I figured I'd make it to Rio Grande, get something to eat, charge my phone and battery, find a bench somewhere to sleep, and then I was going to visit the municipal the following morning and hopefully film and photograph the cemetery. So this put me a day ahead, which was great, and I was really stoked about it, but I didn't get too excited because I know the way things go in Puerto Rico, I could always get put a day behind just like that. So it's nice to get a little bit of slack, but I don't rest on that. And so I was in Rio Grande and I found a bench, and it was a pretty nice bench, and I was getting some sleep off and on, probably an hour, 45 minutes, 2 hours of sleep by the time it was 3 in the morning. And then this guy came and woke me up and asked me if I had any change. And he was honest, at least. He said he needed to get some drugs. And I was like, nah, I don't got nothing, man. I'm sorry. And then so he walked back across the highway, but then I could just see him walking up and down the roadway just looking at me, and it started making me uncomfortable and irritating me, I'll be honest with you. So I just decided, you know what? I am going to just walk at night. I'm going to break one of my main rules, and I'm just going to try to walk to Luquillo right now. It's about, at this time that I come to this conclusion, it's about 3:45 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. So I get up and just start walking. And I made it to Luquillo just as the sun was starting to come out. And I found this nice little bakery, and I got a big glass cup of coffee and a big donut, and that really woke me up and helped spurred me on. And again, because of my encounter with that guy, it ended up pushing me even farther ahead of schedule, which it all worked out in the end. I needed, every time I was able to get ahead of schedule, it turns out I actually needed it. So it all worked out just like it needed to. So then I waited until the municipal's office opened up in Luquillo, and I got their permission to go film and photograph the cemetery there in Luquillo, which I did, and I ended up actually having a couple good conversations with a few people that were there visiting loved ones and whatnot. And so I left that cemetery on a good note and started heading towards Fajardo. That was the next destination, and getting an Airbnb, because after all that, I was pretty whooped. So while I'm in Fajardo, I take care of business. I get into my Airbnb, and I get some supplies and get something to eat for dinner and make sure my water situation's right. And that's one of the things that makes these walks take a lot longer too. When I tell somebody I've walked from San Juan to Ceiba, they don't really realize all the walking in between, to the Airbnb, to the store, to the governor's office, to the cemetery, walking around looking for a bench to sleep on. All these things really add up, and I probably double or triple the actual distance that you would see on a map on walks like this. So it's Thursday night when I got this Airbnb, And so I know I have Friday morning to talk to the municipal of Fajardo and photograph and film their cemetery. And they have a huge cemetery because I had to walk by it to get my Airbnb. So I knew I had a long day ahead of me. So I got up the next morning, talked to the mayor's office, got permission, and I went and filmed and photographed that cemetery. And then I found myself at the plaza of Fajardo, and I figured, you know what, I could just sleep here tonight and then get up early Saturday morning and go to Ceiba, because the thing is, I had to catch my ferry Sunday night at 3 in the morning, I believe. So I had some time to kill during the weekend. So I figured, well, why not just spend my Friday night still here in Fajardo, and I won't make it into Ceiba until sometime Saturday evening. But like Puerto Rico goes, my plans changed once again. I decided that I was going to sleep there at the plaza, and everything was going great at first. Families were walking around, and everybody was happy and smiling, and it just felt like the most peaceful place on earth. It was still well into the afternoon, and we had hours of daylight left, and I was ready to fall asleep right then and there. And then some guy came up kind of by the bench I was sleeping on, and he fell to his knees and he started screaming Satan at the sky. And I kind of just go with my intuition, and I think the universe gives me signs sometimes about what I should do next. And I took that as a sign that staying there that night wasn't the plan, that I needed to go to Ceiba. So I decided just to get up, put my bag on, and even though I was beat up from filming that cemetery all day, I needed to just walk to Ceiba before it got dark. And I made it to the town right before it got dark, and I ended up getting a couple hours of sleep at the plaza there in Ceiba. Ceiba was a really nice little town, and I had a lot of fun the couple days that I got to spend there. So another stroke of good luck that hit me on this walk was the fact that on Saturday morning, the cemetery in Ceiba was actually open. So I got permission to film and photograph the cemetery, and I was able to get in there and get that done on a Saturday, which was a real blessing. So I accomplished all my goals from San Juan to Ceiba up into that point during that walk, which I didn't think I was going to do. But thanks to everything going the way it went, I was able to complete all these tasks. And like I said, I didn't have to catch the boat to go to Vaquez until basically Monday morning at 3 a.m. So here I am Saturday at noon, and I have a couple days to kill. So I got an Airbnb in Ceiba, and it was a really nice one. It had a bed that wasn't on the ground. It was connected to the wall with chains on each corner. So it was like a bed that was like a swing, kind of, is the best way I could describe it. But I slept like a king for a couple days right on that bed under the air conditioner. And it had a really nice living room, and everything about the little Airbnb was just top notch. And I just walked around Ceiba and the surrounding areas for a couple days, and I found the best burger place on the entire island. I forget what the name of it is off the top of my head, but they made some of the best burgers I've ever had in my life. I remember eating there Saturday and Sunday because I love burgers and fries. And so I just spent those couple days walking around, stretching my legs. I made sure to find a laundry mat, and I did a load of laundry and got all my laundry caught up for that whole week because I was running out of socks and t-shirts, and because I could only bring so much living out of a backpack doing these walks. And late that Sunday night, I had my bag packed and I was ready, and I started walking to the Roosevelt Roads to go wait for that ferry to go to the island of Vaquez. And that's where I'm ending this episode. In the next episode, I'll be talking about my trip to Vaquez. And I think I spent about 4 days on that little island. And I wanted to see the old ancient cemetery that they have there. And it didn't disappoint at all. So I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.